Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for joining us tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to our virtual evening with prize-winning Miami Herald journalists Sarah Blaskey, Nehamas and Jay Weaver to discuss their new book, The Grifters Club, Trump, Mar-a-Lago, and the Selling of the Presidency, published by Public Affairs. This breakthrough account takes the reader beyond the gilded gates of Mar-a-Lago, the palatial resort where President Trump conducts government business with little regard for ethics, security, or the law. A study of the impropriety, intrigue, and absurdity that has been on display in the place where the president is at his most relaxed, this team of journalists reveal the activities and motivations of Trump's so-called winter White House clientele. Sarah Blaskey is an investigative reporter and data specialist at the Miami Herald. For their reporting on Trump tourism, she, Nicholas Nehamas, and Caitlin Ostroff were named finalists for the 2020 Livingston Award for Excellence in National Reporting. Nicholas Nehamas is an investigative reporter for the Miami Herald. He was part of a team that won the 2017 Pulitzer Prize for explanatory reporting on the Panama Papers. Last but not least, Jay Weaver has covered courts, government, and politics for more than 25 years for the Herald. He was part of a team that won a Pulitzer Prize for breaking news in 2001, and he and Nicholas were also 2019 Pulitzer Prize finalists for a series on international gold smuggling. Throughout this evening's broadcast, we invite you to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button on the bottom of the screen. And you can find the Grifters Club for purchase at Books and Books below by pressing the green button. Every purchase you make supports Books and Books during these trying times, so we thank you. And now, without further ado, I want to welcome, Sarah's going to come up first. Here we go. There we go.
Well, thank you so much for that intro. I just want to say I am thrilled to be here with the Books and Books audience. I am new to Miami. You might recognize my colleagues' names from their bylines on really big stories at the Miami Herald. And those of you that are Miami natives probably recognize the names Nicholas Nehamas and Jay Weaver. But I'm a little bit new to the scene. I've only been around for about 3 years. And I got to say, Books and Books is the place that made me feel at home when I first came to Miami. And I could not be more excited to be here with you tonight. I never thought this was going to happen. And so I'm really excited to be here with my colleagues. And I don't really know how this goes because I'm an accidental author that sort of stumbled upon a book. And so I've never done this before. And nobody's ever done this before in the time of COVID. So this used to happen live and I could see your faces, but I can't tonight. So my colleagues and I are going to start out with a conversation. And at any point, we're not really talking about the things that you're most interested in. Please ask us a question. You can see the ask a question. I'm actually not sure if you see me in mirror, but somewhere down there, you can type in your question and we want to talk about whatever it is you want to know about. And so just by way of introduction, we're all Miami Herald journalists. Again, I'm the newest. Nick and Jay are old school investigative reporters at the Miami Herald. You might have seen me on the local government beat. So if you ever saw a crazy story out of local government, like a couple of years ago, that was probably me. But I want to start out by thanking our editors at the Miami Herald for supporting us and all of the journalism that we do. And really putting up with some crazy stuff because, you know, people talk about how this book started, and how this book started is I had a crazy hunch about the Robert Kraft story. Remember like a year and a half ago when Robert Kraft went to a spa and he was charged with soliciting prostitution? Yeah. So I heard that story somewhere in the Miami Herald newsroom and thought, that's interesting. I wonder what else is in there. Started digging into the background of those companies and quickly found this woman, Lee Cindy Yang. And I called up my editor, Casey Frank, on a Saturday. Some of you might know him. And I said, hey, Casey, I have this crazy story. I found a selfie on the internet of Lee Cindy Yang with President Donald Trump watching the Super Bowl. And Casey's been at the Herald for a long time. And he was sort of like, And he trusted me enough to let us run with it. I called up Nick. I said, Nick, we've got this crazy thing. We've got to follow up on this. And it all sort of snowballed. And so I want to thank Casey Frank in particular for putting up with our crazy whims and letting us run to the end of the earth with our reporting, and to Rick Hirsch and Mindy Marquez, our executive editor, Mindy, and our managing editor, Rick, for also putting up with our crazy and supporting us in our local reporting on these national stories and letting the Miami Herald really shine for what it is. And all of our colleagues who have really, covered for us in the time where we were too busy or working on the book. They've all heard it way too many times, and they provided you the news every single day if you're from Miami. Well, we weren't able to. And so big shout out to them. And with that, I want to start out and I want to say, Nick, Nehamas, Jay Weaver. Nick's an investigative reporter. Jay is on federal courts and has done more investigations than I can even count. I am thrilled to be here with you. I can't believe this is happening. And I want to kick it off with Nick and ask, so from your perspective, Nick, how did this book really come to be?
So, I have a slightly different version of the story Sarah just told. I remember it was Sunday and Sarah called me and said, Nick, I just found a picture of Cindy Yang with President Donald Trump. And I said, okay, Sarah, I'm with my family. I'll call you back tomorrow. And I had no idea that Sarah would spend the next 24 hours digging through Cindy Yang's Facebook and finding pictures of her, not only with Donald Trump, but then Governor Rick Scott, now Governor Ron DeSantis, Matt Gaetz, Don Jr., a whole host of Republican celebrities and politicians. And what it led us into was this bizarre world of access peddling that has sprung up because of the simple fact that the President of the United States owns a club in Palm Beach where anyone with enough money can buy a membership, and anyone with even a little bit of money can buy a ticket to go to a charity gala. It is absolutely unprecedented in the history of this country. And because it happens in Florida, or it is full of the zaniest, wackiest characters you could ever imagine, Sarah had the really great idea to think of this as a Carl Hiaasen novel. And Carl Hiaasen blurbed the book for a reason. We had one commenter say, if this were a novel, I wouldn't believe it. It's too outlandish. But that is Mar-a-Lago, that's Palm Beach, and that's Donald Trump. So you're in for a fun night, I hope, and a serious one too, because a lot of what we found was very troubling. So I want to throw it to Jay and just say, in a newspaper, you see a lot of 4 byline articles. That's very common. We work together. A book with 4 authors is not as common. So can you talk about how we divided up this massive reporting task and split the work?
Well, the whole launching of this book was kind of inadvertent. It happened because Nick and I were already working on a book about gold smuggling from Latin America, from South America and the rainforest in particular. And we would finish the first draft, and the editor had been reading some stories by Nick and Sarah about Mar-a-Lago and all these access peddlers, as he put it. And he suggested that they pitch this idea for a book. And, Nick and I looked at each other and thought, oh my God, another book? I mean, we're only halfway through the one we're doing now. Are you out of your mind? So this is where the spoils were divided. Sarah took the lead on it because she had taken the most interest and had the most time to take off. And Nick and I couldn't take any more time off. So we had to be working weekends, in addition to our work weekdays to pull off the book. And so Sarah started off doing more of the investigative reporting and trying to gain access to Mar-a-Lago. And Nick assisted with that. And then I started playing more of a role with behind the scenes reporting on national security issues and Chinese espionage investigations as they revolve around Mar-a-Lago. And then Caitlin Ostroff helped a lot with research, a lot of research, and a lot of background into Mar-a-Lago. And I collaborated a lot with Sarah in the early stages of the book. And so it all kind of coalesced, but it didn't happen in a linear way. It sort of unfolded. There was a story or two in the paper, and that might become a chapter in the book. There was another story or two in the paper, that might become a chapter in the book. But over time, the book sort of overran or overcame the news articles, and it just uncovered all kinds of wacky characters who show up at Mar-a-Lago just to be, touching the hem of of our president, and that's how it unfolded. And so, it was a collaborative effort, but clearly Sarah, in the end, with Nick, did more of the writing, and I contributed more of the writing toward the back of the book. But there was a lot of reporting by all of us.
And I just want to say there's one more byline on this book. That's Caitlin Ostroff. We're super sad she can't be here, but we're really, really proud of her. She actually got a job at the Wall Street Journal in London. Yeah, Caitlin, we're all jealous. So Caitlin will be with us on other events, but she's not here tonight. She's a South Florida native, and we really miss her. So Caitlin, if you're watching, big shout out. And you all should follow her work at the Wall Street Journal. Everyone sort of asked me, Jay and Nick, over and over since we've published this book, when did you know in the course of your local reporting that you had enough for a book? And the answer is, about 8 a.m. on January 8th, 2020, when we turned in the first draft. I was really sweating bullets before then. But I am grateful for the publisher and our agent for saying that they thought that our local reporting team had enough to go with. We had leads, we had sources, and that we were, we were ready to go with a book about Mar-a-Lago, and I appreciate that confidence. And one of the things that made me think, being a newer reporter here in South Florida, is that national stories for my entire life have always been based in Florida. And I thought, why is that? What is this place? It could be 9/11 had a tie to South Florida and all kinds of other stuff. And so, Jay, you've been here the longest. You're our federal courts reporter. You've seen basically everything in this country unfold from a South Florida angle. How do you see this story, the winter White House being in Palm Beach, a unexpected president being from South Florida? How did you go about this story, and is it different than telling other national stories from a local angle in South Florida?
Well, my wife and I moved down here from Boston the year after Hurricane Andrew, and that was a national story in itself because it obliterated Miami and South Florida, at least the section around Miami. And, that clearly caught the attention, of the world. But Miami had been on the map before then. I mean, because of Miami Beach, because of, the cocaine cowboys, drug trafficking, between South America and South Florida. You had, all of those storied events. And then in addition to all that, you have a place that is always becoming something. And a lot of different types of people come here, all types, good, bad, and different. It's very transient. It's kind of like what California might have been like back in the 60s and maybe early 70s. But, it's becoming something, but it's not quite grown up. And it has this culture, I've always called it, this culture of cheating. And everybody's always hustling. Everybody's always scamming. And it goes on everywhere. And a lot of it's economic crimes, Medicare fraud crimes, ID theft crimes, credit card fraud. Everybody's scamming everybody. They'll even steal the money out of the parking meters. And there's not a lot of shame to it. It just goes on and on and on. So the Mar-a-Lago story, doesn't really stand out, when you look at it through the lens of this Grifters Club, the president's club, where he, makes a lot of money off the presidency and off his own club. That's one way to look at it. But it's the fact that so many types of people go there and will pay to go there to gain access to him or the hope of seeing him and wanting to be like him. And it just gets a lot of misfits and wealthy people. But they're not all blue bloods. They're anything but that. They really run the gamut, celebrity types, doyens, models, cheerleaders, you name it. They show up there because they want to be near him. And so, for South Florida, it's just a typical kind of story, but it's outlandish only because it's the president of the United States.
Yeah. And you make me think of this one passage in the book, Jay, that I am really excited to have the South Florida expertise to be able to write. And so I promise this is the only excerpt we're going to read, you all. I know that gets boring, but here's the line. And this is about President of China, Xi Jinping, coming to Mar-a-Lago, and these staffers in DC trying to get ready for him. And so this is from the book. The DC bureaucrats handling logistics for Xi's visit quickly realized that making deals in South Florida was nothing like the rest of the world. The civil servants were structured, procedural, and used to people following the rules, especially those set by the federal government. A typical South Floridian couldn't care less about any of those things. To a South Floridian, being an hour late is being on time. Every business deal is a chance to con or be conned, and rules don't exist. Just look at the way people drive. And that is South Florida reporting, right, Jay? That's really the essence of what you're getting, right?
Right. And nobody's ashamed of it. I mean, I've always been amazed at how people who end up getting convicted of crimes and going to prison, they rebound and come back and reincarnate themselves. I mean, most people would run away and hide under a rock, but not in South Florida. It's a sunny place with a lot of sketchy people, as they say, and a lot of shady people, actually, is the line.
So, Sarah, this is a book that deals with what happens to national security and presidential safety when Mar-a-Lago staff have more control over who enters the president's home than Secret Service. It's about the naked acts of corruption that can occur when people can literally buy their way into the president's home. It's about what happens to foreign policy when a member can whisper in the president's ear and produce Mongolian diplomats or former Colombian presidents to come meet the president. So this is not your typical Trump book, and I think it all starts with the writing style and the sourcing. So can you talk about what separates this book from the other incredible reporting and writing that's been done on this president?
Yeah. So, I really respect all of the reporting that's been done on this president and all of the things that we've seen, but I started feeling like it all sounded the same. These were all Washington insiders who were big names, who had been something in the administration, and they, didn't really, they didn't really encapsulate the president in his entirety. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to go out and talk to everyday South Floridians and talk to people who are members of the club, who work at the club, and really reflect their stories. And as Jay and you have said in this conversation, South Florida is a bit absurd. And so I felt like, how do I actually reflect the absurdity of this place in writing? And so I looked to a Miami Herald columnist who I really respect, Carl Hyacin, who writes novels about South Florida, and every character is larger than life. And I thought, maybe I can write a nonfiction book like that. And Angelica, age 8, wants to know what's so wonky about the characters. And Angelica, I'm really happy to answer that question too. I think these are people who live a lavish lifestyle like you and I can't imagine. Probably, Angelica, I don't know your place in life, but these are people who have so much money that they're bored in day-to-day interactions. And so they join country clubs and do philanthropy in an effort to not be bored. And this is something that happens kind of frequently in South Florida, which I learned when I moved here is kind of like the spring break for everyone, even the rich and the famous of the world. But Nick, I know we had other things to plan here for this conversation, but what would you say to Angelica, who's 8 years old? What is so crazy about the characters in this book?
I think that these are people. So let's take the members. They were close to a very successful, brash Playboy developer and became friends with him, even if their politics didn't align at all. Because Trump, as we learned from reporting this book, despite the fiery anti-immigrant racist speeches and rally he gives, is very charming in person. He's a very charming host, and he approaches politics very much like that. So these members, all of a sudden, by dint of belonging to a ritzy Palm Beach club, found themselves whispering into the ear of the leader of the free world. And for the staffers who signed up to be cooks and waiters and gardeners at this club, they were all of a sudden at the center of the federal government. And I think their stories are the most compelling. And Sarah did a lot of sourcing with these people, but they had no reason to talk. They were worried about losing their jobs, but they saw things going wrong close to the president. They're afraid for his safety. They're afraid for their safety, because this is a 17-acre property where anyone can basically walk on, and many people have walked on without being stopped. And they're afraid for the country because they see a president who is sometimes more concerned with his dinner parties and giving toasts at weddings and with matters of national security. And the last thing I'd just say is, this is a book about a place, so it doesn't have that kind of traditional narrative like you'd see in one of Jay's court stories or some other work we've done. This is really a book about characters, and we use the characters to expand on the various problems that Mar-a-Lago poses to the safety of the American democracy.
Someone just posted, all it takes is money. That is Palm Beach. And, whoever you are, I agree. Palm Beach is one of these places that, as someone from Wisconsin, humble roots, I couldn't even really believe existed when I came to South Florida. And so, there are these larger than life characters, and I hope we did them justice in the book. Sometimes they seem a little bit absurd to I'd like to think I'm sort of average to your average person. And I think that some of the things I witnessed were, worth giggling a little bit about. And I hope you get a couple giggles from the book. But I want to throw it back to my colleague, Jay Weaver, who, you've been in federal courts for a long time. Your sources for this book were so important for us, especially on the national security side. And what do they say about a place like this?
It's a mad world up there. And I'm telling you, every one of them just shakes their head and rolls their eyes. They just don't know what to make of it, because Mar-a-Lago is a very difficult place to guard, because the president has created an atmosphere of informality. Usually when you go to like the LBJ Ranch in Texas, or Jimmy Carter's peanut farm, or, even, Eisenhower, where would he go? He would go to Camp David quite a bit, but they'd always be able to control who came, who went. They knew everybody on the list. They could anticipate any activity at all. They vetted everyone who came. It is the total opposite at Mar-a-Lago. The Secret Service, yes, they do background checks, but only on certain people who accompany the president, come to state visits, or come in his entourage. And they really are only looking at those people. The members, the guests, the people who show up at the galas, all those people don't get backgrounded. And yes, the Secret Service does, check for weapons and checks for, for hazardous materials and things of that nature. But it's not the same thing. They have to rely on the club staff in order to be able to know who's coming and going, who belongs there, who doesn't. So they learn these things sometimes up until the last minute. And what has happened is a lot of people end up getting into the club who don't belong. And there were a few visitors, including a Chinese intruder, who's very much a subject of the book, who showed up there and really sort of exposed the Swiss cheese security of the place. I mean, it is just something. I mean, they all sigh, these federal agents, prosecutors, observers, because there's nothing they can do about it, because the president had created this very informal atmosphere. He likes it that way because he thrives in that environment. It's his kingdom, and he calls the shots.
If I could jump in for 1 minute quickly, Jay, just to give a little more on that Zhang example. So this Chinese businesswoman showed up without a valid invitation, but with a purse full of electronics that were found to be very suspicious by federal agents. She was waved through by Secret Service because she had no guns or bombs. And club staff were confused about who she was, but decided that because there was a member with her last name, Zhang, which is one of the 5 most common surnames in China, a country of more than 1 billion people, they decided, she must be his daughter or relative, and they let her in. And can you imagine trying to get in the White House in Washington, D.C. with that kind of flimsy credentials? It just wouldn't happen. But as Jay was saying, at Mar-a-Lago, money is the only priority, and the president knows he will lose business at the club if he puts in the kind of security you'd expect at a government facility.
Well, I'll add one thing. You'll have to read the book to figure out who figured out she didn't belong there, but I can assure you it wasn't a Secret Service agent.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy is I've told people this time and time again. We start putting the book together and we write this line that says, all these dinner guests that go to the terrace at Mar-a-Lago every Saturday night, even the Saturday nights where the president is there, this can be hundreds and hundreds of people. They're not background checked. And I called Jay and I called Nick and then I called Jay again. And I said, this can't be real. This is the president of the United States. They do arm's length background checks. I know this from other reporting that I've done. This can't be right. And we checked it and we called people, and that's true. At this club, you can get closer to the president at this club, closer than anywhere else in the world. Anywhere else, you'd go through this Secret Service background check if you were with what they call within arm's length of the president. That's right, Jay?
That's absolutely right. And it's extraordinary because it's his home. Right.
And so, we have a question here that's an in the weeds journalism question. I love those. It's about the importance of local reporting. And it sometimes, this is what this commenter said. It seems sometimes that the focus is on national news outlets, but as you've demonstrated, local newspapers like the Miami Herald are incredibly important to providing national stories of interest. Thank you, commenter. And I want to kick this one over to Nick, because Nick, you've found a way to find all of these national and international stories in a Miami focused way. You've reported on Russian motorcycle gangs. You are known for your reporting on the Panama Papers, the Dirty Gold series. How does this story compare, and how would you say a local perspective plays into that?
Right. So those are all, the stories you described, incredibly secretive worlds, Russian organized crime, wealthy people hiding money offshores, international gold smuggling. Mar-a-Lago was really no different, because at the core of the Mar-a-Lago story is who are the members of this club. And that is a very closely guarded secret. Palm Beach is exclusive. And while President Trump, he was not president then, when he was advertising the club, he pretended that people like Henry Kissinger and Prince Charles were members and gave them honorary memberships to try and promote the club, although they, as a spokesman for Buckingham Palace, said that, just because Mr. Trump says they're members doesn't make them so, and they had no interest in joining the club. But I bring that up to say that I think one of the big news breaks we made in this book is the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was actually a member of Mar-a-Lago, and that's something that the Trump organization has denied for years. They said he came to the club, but he was never a member, and they were able to get away with what we proved to be a lie because this membership list is such a closely guarded secret. Now, we were able to see a membership list that showed very clearly that Jeffrey Epstein, who lived at his former mansion in Palm Beach, had his account closed in October 2007, and as we report, well, I won't spoil it. It's in the book why he was kicked out. But the membership now costs $250,000. It cost $100,000 before Trump's election, and there's a reason for that. He's a businessman. He knew that more people would want to join the exclusive ranks of this club to get close to the president, and he very cynically, some would say, made money off it. So now let me go to Sarah. We've talked a little bit about the sourcing, but I mean, reporters have gone after this story before, and maybe you can pick up on the local angle here, but no one has gotten as deep into this club as you did. So how did you get the sources to open up for this story?
So I have two main answers to that. One is that my reporting style is getting to know people, and the way that I get to know people is by telling them that I already understand a little bit about their world. I had a really interesting professor at Columbia University. I think, Nick, you had him too, a teacher who is actually a private investigator. I'm not going to call him out by name because I'm not sure if he would want us to, but he always talked about this source journalist relationship being what that sounds like, a relationship, a human interaction. And I've always really taken that to heart. And one of the things about a human interaction is that people want to find out things about what's going on. They want to feel understood by you when you go to them for information. And I'm sure both of you have had this experience, and I'm speaking to the choir, but as a younger journalist, one of the amazing things, and one of the things I found really helpful, is talking to people and saying, so I understand this, and talking about something nitty gritty about their life that they think that most people don't understand. And it's about coming from that perspective of understanding and where they might want to speak from and what might be going on in their lives. I understand that other staff members at Mar-a-Lago feel really vulnerable. They feel like, there might be some security risk that they didn't really sign up for now that their boss is the president of the United States. That sounds pretty intense. Let's talk about that. And that's how I approach these conversations. And the other thing that I would say is the way that we've sourced is, I'm a millennial. I do the same thing every millennial does. And I go on social media and I find the people that have geotagged themselves in certain places. So I hope I'm not, eliminating my future sources by telling you not to geotag or what have you. But certainly I go on social media and I look at who said, hi, I was at Mar-a-Lago and I did this. And I contact them and I say, hey, do you want to chat? And I talk to them about the experiences that I've heard about. And so that's really how we built sources for this book. And, I just have to say, I'm so grateful to especially the staff members who decided to speak with me. I think there is very little personal interest in speaking to a journalist when you find yourself as a staff member at the winter White House. You only have things to lose. But I think people there really thought that the public, the people listening to this talk, really deserved the information that they had and the perspective that they had on the president of the United States that's so unique in his home. And they decided to go out on a limb and share that information. And I respect them for that. I respect them for their bravery. And I I want to say thank you if any of them are listening.
So, Nick, I know you and Sarah have actually visited Mar-a-Lago. Many of us mere mortals have only seen it from outside the compound and looking in. And, it is rather impressive there as it sits atop a perch of maybe 3 or 4 feet overlooking the ocean. And it's the, former Marjorie Merriweather Post, mansion, estate. So, what's it like? What did Trump do to it? And what's the atmosphere there? Did you ever go there and visit it yourselves?
Yeah, so Sarah and I actually went to a charity event at the President's Club in December. It was a Sunday luncheon, the cheapest charity event of the season, because that was the one we could afford. And as you said, it's this beautiful, kind of Moorish revival property built in the 1920s by one of America's leading socialites, Marjorie Merriweather Post, a very accomplished businesswoman, heir to the Post cereal fortune, and an art collector. It has the largest collection of Moorish tiles in the world. It has stones from a Spanish castle in Cuba. It's a beautiful property. There's a bust of Cicero, the great defender of Roman liberty against tyranny, in the entryway. And all of that has been restored by Trump and, remains much the same. Because it's a historic property, the president has only really been able to build one building. And of course, he named it after himself, the Donald J. Trump Grand Ballroom. And he designed it, personally in the most extravagant Louis XIV, Versailles style. And when he walked in for the first time in late 2004, he looked around the ceiling and he decided that the gold paint just wasn't shiny enough. And he'd already spent millions building this building. He spent another $7 million covering this poor building in gold leaf to match the inside of it, to match, his idea of luxury. And so it does look incredible. But what he didn't realize was that the leaf and the mirrored walls mean that it is absolutely impossible to hear yourself think, much less have a conversation. So Sarah and I had a really interesting time because it was more of an open event. You had everyone from Judge Jeanine Pirro to people who'd driven down from northern Florida, the southeast, to see where the president lives. They are MAGA Trump superfans. There's one gentleman at our table wearing, not black tie, but a black T-shirt that said, "Make Christmas Great Again." I would give the food a less than stellar review, and people in Palm Beach have noted that the service and the food have gone down significantly since he became president. But it was certainly an experience. And again, it's a reminder, anyone in this audience, if you got a few $100, can go party with the president of the United States. And there's no doubt that the presidency has been very, very good for Donald Trump's business.
For the brand, in other words, it's really, talk a little bit more about that, because I think one of the things that people don't realize, and this is the serious side of things, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about the brand and what he's done to capitalize on it there.
Right. Well, for instance, Trump has hosted Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chinese President Xi Jinping, not at the White House in D.C., but at Mar-a-Lago. And there's a very clear reason for doing that. Trump has said, and this may be true, that he's more comfortable at Mar-a-Lago. He can develop better relationships with these foreign leaders there. But it is also the best free advertising you could ever imagine. The State Department even wrote a blog post about, the history of Mar-a-Lago and what a wonderful property it is. And to give you a quick example, to go back to Cindy Yang, who Sarah was talking about, when wealthy Chinese people saw the president of their nation visiting the president of the United States at Mar-a-Lago, they wanted to go to Mar-a-Lago. And people like Cindy Yang and Charles Lee and other characters in the book quickly capitalized on this business. They bought up tickets to charity events. They resold them to wealthy Chinese tourists, including the woman we mentioned earlier who was investigated for being a Chinese spy. And that's what really has national security experts so worried. The fact that anyone could come in with a listening device and start gathering intelligence on the president's club. There was one woman who snuck in through the bushes and got access to a club computer and started writing obscenities, but she just as easily could have started lacing malware.
And this is a question for Sarah. I know our president's reputation precedes him. He has a sort of ogreish profile, and you can't hear me.
I can hear you, Jay.
You can hear me, but Sarah can't.
Hi, everyone. It seems that Sarah disconnected something when she took off her ear pods.
Okay.
Can you text her and let her know that she just needs to try to reconnect again?
Yes.
The way she did before. And even tell her that if she has some regular headphones that connect right into the laptop, she might want to grab those.
Christine, I find this ironic because this is something I would do, not the millennial.
It is ironic. She's going to get a kick out of it if she can ever, be her again.
She should disconnect and reconnect.
No, what I would suggest is trying to okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see if that works.
Jay, what was your question? Do you want to?
No, I mean, a lot of people don't like this president. And
Okay,
are you back, Sarah? Can you hear us?
I'm back.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. Sorry, the joys of doing this from home.
So, Sarah, what I wanted to ask you was, and I'm sorry you got cut off there. So, a lot of people do not like this president. That's no secret. I mean, a lot of people just despise him. They see him as an ogre. He says hateful things about people. He doubles down on saying hateful things about people. He just seems like a bully. And yet, he is in his element at Mar-a-Lago, and many people there who don't even share his politics, or at least not originally, seem to like him. Why is he such a populist charmer? Why does he turn so many people on?
So I feel like throughout the course of reporting this book, I've really started to understand something about Donald Trump, President Trump, that I never understood before. And that is that to his core, the thing that overrides everything else about him is that he is the ultimate party host. And so, Donald Trump is the kind of guy at Mar-a-Lago who will walk past your table at dinner and put his hand on your shoulder and say, "Hey, how's it going? I see that you've lost some weight, looking good." And he remembers your name at Mar-a-Lago. And what's so interesting about all of that is it sort of contradicts other things that we know about this man. People question his memory. Well, at Mar-a-Lago, his staff and his members all say he remembers every name of every person he's ever met. He remembers the size of the shrimp and them not being good enough in a shrimp cocktail. He remembers a lot of things. He has this incredible attention for detail for things that he cares about. And what he cares about is that people have a good time at his parties. And so one of my favorite illustrations of this is Donald Trump is a known germaphobe, right? He hates germs. He never even used to shake hands with people, his friends say. But now that his party are a bunch of voters who don't want to wear masks because they see it as a freedom issue during a global pandemic, the germaphobe in chief is not interested in wearing a mask either. And that seems like a contradiction until you see him at his core. And that is this party host, this person who's going to make you feel invited, make you feel included, make you feel like you're part of this elite club. And that's what he did at Mar-a-Lago and what made it so successful in Palm Beach. And now that's what he's doing in the Republican Party.
Right. And he also, picks and chooses the people he wants to be charming to. And we've talked about how he is sort of this contradiction. On the one hand, he can be such an awful, bullyish person. And on the other hand, he can be so charming and personable. And a lot of that has to do with, the grifter himself, Trump, because largely what he's doing here with his club, with his life, with his brand, with his family, with the presidency, is capitalizing on his name. And he does a pretty good job of it. And if you help him achieve those goals and build his ego and build his empire and build his, pocketbook, he will embrace you. And if you don't, he will crush you, and he will do everything to crush you. And so there is that sort of dichotomy. And I think the people that politically support him, whether they're rich, poor, or whatever, sort of back him up for being that way. It's almost a vicarious thing, but they just back him up for being that way. A lot of us who are, probably looking at things from a more reasonable perspective, just wonder, how does he get away with this? And, how can he offend people this way? And how can he waste taxpayers' money that way or this way? But we're being rational, we're being reasonable, we're being analytical, and that's just not the way he thinks. It's all about opportunity for Donald Trump.
So we have a bunch of questions in the chat, and my sound went down entirely. I couldn't hear you, you couldn't hear me. So I don't know which ones we have answered or not. We had one from Fabi Santiago, who is a colleague of ours and one of the female writers that I really admire. Did we answer Fabi's question about the White House response?
No, we didn't.
All right. So Fabi's question is this. What has been the response to the book from the White House, the Trump campaign, and the GOP?
There has been no response. We went repeatedly to the White House and the Trump board, with some very serious allegations, some of which we mentioned tonight, some of which are in the book to give them a chance to respond. And it was complete radio silence, nothing on the record. We even asked if President Trump would give us an interview and a tour of the club. No luck there either.
Yeah.
And Joyce wants to talk about Trump Doral. So I'm going to leave that up to Nick or Jay. Trump Doral is a golf club that wasn't originally owned by Donald Trump, that is in Doral, Florida, which anyone who's familiar with the area probably knows is like behind the airport. It's the municipality behind the airport. It was until recently also the home of the Miami Herald office. But it is outer Miami for those of you who are from out of town. So Trump Doral, what's the similarity? What's the difference? How do we orient around that property versus Mar-a-Lago?
So Trump Doral is much more of your standard issue Trump club. It's not as exclusive. It's right near the airport. It has a very well-respected golf course, but it doesn't have the same place in the president's heart. He's rarely there. He doesn't have any quarters there like he does at Mar-a-Lago, his kind of lavish apartment. But he still has tried to use that club to make money, off his presidency. He even suggested, was it the G7 or the G8, Sarah? He even suggested hosting this huge government international meeting at the club, and was kind of quickly talked out of that by criticism from the public and members of his own administration who thought it would be improper.
Well, the neighbors also don't like him, and they don't like what he's done to the club. And he has made improvements, and it's a better golf course than it used to be, and it's a PGA golf course. They have a tournament there, every year, and so you can't really compare the two. Look, Doral is, I don't want to say too little of it because they might take it personally, but let's face it, it's not Palm Beach. It's in the middle of nowhere, whereas Palm Beach is right on the ocean, and it's just night and day. The whole atmosphere is different.
And it looks like we have one more question from Anais. Sarah, I'm going to throw this to you. What do you all think will be the long-term effects of having a president who exploits his relationships, business ventures for unprecedented personal gain? Will this presidency create precedent for nepotism and corruption? Of course, this is just my little add-on to the question. We're talking about a country where historically Jimmy Carter had to sell his peanut farm to send to the presidency. So Sarah, what are the long-term effects of this going to be?
I think that's largely up to the American public, actually. And I don't think we've seen the culmination of that question. Of course, I don't know if we've talked about it. Again, I apologize, I couldn't hear you. if we have, and I'm repeating, sorry, but the emoluments clause of the Constitution does prohibit the president from making money off of the presidency from the US federal government, state governments, or foreign governments. And certainly those remain unanswered questions. Is what President Trump doing by charging the Secret Service, charging all of these federal agencies at his clubs like Mar-a-Lago, is that a violation of the emoluments clause of the US Constitution? We still see those things moving through courts, and so we ultimately don't know. I do think that this has raised a question for many members of the American public, especially Mar-a-Lago and Trump Hotel in DC, these two places that, people from around the world, people who are dignitaries with foreign governments, they do spend money there in an effort, and sometimes a blatant effort, to gain favor with the Trump administration. I think we've seen a sort of actual in practice example of what the founding fathers might have been worried about when they started talking about enriching oneself from the presidency. I think that's a conversation that will carry on whether or not Donald Trump wins re-election in November. I think it's an open-ended question, and I certainly think it's made real for many American voters, this otherwise sort of obscure clause in the US Constitution. I know that's true for me. I'm not sure I would have known what an emolument was before Donald Trump became president, but now I'm deeply familiar with the term. So I don't know if that answers your question, but certainly this is an ongoing exploration for many people.
Let's see. I think we hit all the questions. Someone agrees with or says that Mar-a-Lago's garish, over the top, and meeting DJT, fleeting though it was, left me with the impression of an extremely short attention span. And that's true. And I just want to talk quickly about the people who have been members of Mar-a-Lago for a long time. They know that the president has a short attention span, and they know how to deal with it. And one of the themes that runs through this book is how people who've known him for so long are so easily and often able to outmaneuver the Republican establishment in DC, the political operatives, the consultants, the senators, the congressmen. As one member told us, Trump doesn't have a political ideology. So you're never going to get him like that. You're never going to be able to approach him directly and say, I want this, I want that, I think this is right. What you should do is kind of plant ideas in the president's mind through these casual meetings over dinner, or at the buffet bar, at the pool. And as he said, you plant seeds and you water them and you see which ones grow, and then you pluck them when they're ripe. And that's the advantage that these Mar-a-Lago members have over everyone else in America. They can, imagine, they can literally be at the pool and walk up and start talking to the President of the United States. It is well worth, in their eyes, $250,000.
I really want to return to that idea of the value of local journalism to sort of kick off this event. We're not DC insiders. We don't have the sources that a Washington insider would have, but what we really do have is an intimate knowledge of South Florida, just like a lot of the listeners here tonight. This place, it's different than anywhere else in the country. This is your home. This is the place you've made your home. And it's got that special something. And I think that's what this book is about. It's about showing a person at their home, showing the president at his home. And it just so happens that this president's home is in the most South Florida. Yes, I'm using South Florida as an adjective. The most South Florida place in South Florida that exists in its larger than life way of being. And I think that's why this book was so fun to write for me, and I don't know how Jay and Nick feel about it, but at least for me, it was such a fun experience to really see that. I'll just say it. Carl Hiaasen's characters, they could be real life characters. And that's what I learned from writing this book. And I don't know if you guys want to jump in there.
Well, I was just going to add from my perspective that I don't think national reporters or DC reporters could have written this book or even conceived it. Local reporters, however, could conceive it, could write it, because they took a local story and made it national. The national reporters, they come here and they would have just, they just look at, it's only local to them because this is where the president hangs out, every other weekend during the winter season. But the reality is that it is his home. He's made Florida his home permanently and officially, because I think New York ran him out of town, and this is the one place where he feels welcome. But the reality is we saw it as a local story, and I don't think the national media, it would never have occurred to them that this was a local story. They never would have looked at it this way. Just never would have happened.
So, and yeah, I'll just say one final thing. I hope you had as much fun listening to us as we did writing the book. And whether you buy the book or not, and I sure hope you do, please do subscribe to the Miami Herald, or if you're not from Miami, your local newspaper, because without thriving, strong, well-staffed newsrooms, none of these stories or any of the work that our colleagues do will get told. So please subscribe, please support us. We're all members of One Herald Guild, our newsroom union, and we have a new owner coming to town, a hedge fund from New Jersey. We're excited to welcome them. We're going to keep doing the work that we're doing, but we really need community support now more than ever. So please subscribe.
And I just want to say thank you again to Books and Books for having us and hosting the series and having our book on pre-sale and now on sale. You can support your local bookstore. You can support us by buying the Grifters Club at Books and Books. And if you're not in Miami, that's what's exciting about COVID virtual author tours now, is that you don't have to be in the city where these bookstores are. So if you're not from Miami, you can also go to indiebound.org and you can look up the Grifters Club and type in your zip code, and it will actually tell you which independent bookstores in your area also have our book available for purchase. And we really appreciate your support. It seems like a couple last minute things have come in question wise. No, they're just thank yous. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to be talking to you again soon.
I want to thank all of you. You complement each other very beautifully. I can see why this book, comes together so well. Congratulations. We've already sold many copies. We intend to continue selling many more. The Miami Herald has been so important to us throughout the years. We have so many friends there that are Books and Books people that have supported us throughout the years. This is an event and a book that is very close to our heart. So thank you for joining us. I hope I'll see all of you in real life soon. And I need to know what a geotag is.
Yeah.
And I intend to ask our social media team immediately, because that is a great little tip. Okay. So anyway, good night to everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.